What's up guys, welcome back to the Green Hole Garage. You can see that I've got a brand new RX-PX 325. Last week we built this thing, this week we're taking it apart. So I've got 0.9 hours on it, and being the person I am, I cannot wait any longer. We're taking this engine apart to look at differences with the supercharger, the camshaft, and a couple other things that they did on the 325 that none of you guys have really seen yet. Of course, we're going to put it back together in stock form. We've got some big things planned for this. First step is going to be removing the speed limiter and seeing how fast it will run with just the speed limiter delete. But before we do that, I definitely want to take this apart just for my own fun. So we're going to take the seat off and dive right in. Now that the seat's off, you can see we got a different intake tube here. We're going to remove this so we can get the supercharger out. There's also this little plastic recirculating blow-off valve here. Kind of cheap looking. We're going to end up replacing that. So let's get right to it. It looks like we just got a couple little straps here to remove this. Zip ties and a couple hose clamps, and this will come right out. Now with all of that out the way, we can see this little supercharger here. This supercharger is just tiny compared to the old 300s, and it's locked both ways. So they went with a new clutch design this year. Said it's a cam clutch. A Sprag clutch is also considered a cam clutch, which is what's in the Yamahas, and that's a one-way bearing. It'll allow it to spin freely one way, but not the other. This is not spinning in either direction because I wouldn't even call this system a clutch. This utilizes a damper just to take the shock load off of the supercharger and the supercharger shaft. Pretty much as close as you can get to a direct driven supercharger as you can get. So we're gonna pull this out of the ski to take a closer look at it. Looks like we just got 3 E8 Torx bolts here, and we're gonna get those out and pull the supercharger off to take a closer look. Got the 325 supercharger out. This one is an old 260 supercharger, which is a little bit different from the 300s, but overall it's the same basic design. If you've never seen one of these before, you probably wouldn't even notice the difference between the two. The 300, 260s, whatever, they all use the same design where it's being driven directly off the crankshaft. You got some clutch washers in here. So you're limited as to how fast this thing can spin. And of course, the slower it spins, you're limited on boost pressure. So you end up with a much larger supercharger. You've got more rotational mass with the supercharger impeller. It's a fantastic design. It's proven to be very reliable, but Sea-Doo thought it was time to upgrade that, and that's what we got here. I mean, this thing is just cute compared to this. It is very small. It's like a little snail shell. This one uses planetary gears for the gear ratio to really boost the RPM that the supercharger spins. You can see that working on the back, and it's mesmerizing how this works. You've got a much smaller supercharger impeller, but it's spinning so much faster. It's probably close to 3 times as fast as this, so it produces more boost pressure than the outgoing design does, being the smaller size. Hopefully this is going to be an even more reliable system than the already reliable supercharger design, but I guess only time will tell. With something new, I'm sure there's going to be flaws and growing pains, so we will see. This one is just held together by a C-clip, so I'm going to try to get the C-clip off, split the housing, and I'll split the housing on this one to get an even more in-depth look at the new supercharger. And just like that, I got both of them apart. It's pretty easy to do. I've done thousands of these, so I know my way around that one. But this one's just a C-clip, and it seals to the housing with an O-ring, and it uses a dowel pin to line it up to where this is clocked properly and doesn't spin around. But you can see how small the supercharger impeller is. This is much smaller in diameter compared to the old one. This is an older supercharger, not a 300, but even this one, you can see just how much larger in diameter this impeller is, and it's cast, so that's more rotational mass than this one is, and that's why they could spin this at such high RPM. It weighs less. It'll be a little bit more reliable. I do have a billet aftermarket 300 supercharger impeller that I'll show you just for reference is just how small this is. There you go, side by side 300 impeller versus the new OEM 325 impeller. There's a huge difference here. Even though this one is smaller, it's spinning at that higher RPM and does make more boost. The aftermarket is going to have a lot of fun with this. This is very similar to a turbocharger design. This is pretty much a gear-driven turbocharger with the way they designed the supercharger impeller. So I'm looking forward to getting some aftermarket upgrades for this, seeing how much boost we could wring out of the stock one, and see how much boost it's going to be capable of with an aftermarket upgrade. So I think this is going to be huge for Sea-Doo, and we'll be seeing some boost numbers similar to what we'd see with the Yamaha SVHO. There's drop-in supercharger impellers for that make well over 30 pounds of boost, and I think we're going to see that with Sea-Doo now as well. So I think the future is very bright with this new supercharger design, and I cannot wait to get to modifying and upgrading this. Now that we got that off, we're going to pull the intake manifold off, because I do want to check all the coolant lines on this. I do not want to blow one off and end up blowing the motor. First thing I do when I buy any Sea-Doo is check all of the coolant hoses, because they are known for popping off. Now with the 325, they were supposed to change the procedure and some of the hose clamps to prevent that, but of course I do not trust it yet. I'm going to check all of the ones on this just to be damn sure. Alright, so the manifold's out, and I noticed a couple things while doing this. We already knew that we had a new intake manifold gasket. We used to have individual gaskets that just pressed into here. Now we have this two-piece gasket, and it's the first time I've actually seen it. Another thing is all of these intake manifold runners, they're very oily. I noticed the intake tube was oily, and this is why I always tell people to run a catch can on your Sea-Doo. It's very easy to overfill these things. This one was overfilled straight from the factory. The factory puts the oil in it and it was overfilled. So we're going to siphon some of this oil out for now, but ultimately we're going to put a catch can on this so we're not just drowning the engine with oil. So what happens is when this oil gets in the intake, it lowers the knock rating of your fuel and you lose performance. So definitely make sure you've got the right oil level and put a catch can on to be even safer. Another thing that I noticed was on this wire harness, we no longer have grounds on these ignition coils, but we do have an added ground on an intake manifold bolt. So I would bet that they did away with the grounds here and relocated it there. And that'll just make things easier, not quite as complex when you're doing a service on these. Now pulling the intake manifold off, my concern was these two hoses here. I wanted to make sure those were tight because these are actually the most common ones to pop off, and they're actually very tight. I can't even spin them. Typically I would be able to spin these. So I guess Sea-Doo did do a good job with improving their clamping on their hoses. The last thing we're going to do is pull the ignition coils off and the valve cover off to see if we could take a look at this camshaft. A little birdie told me that this camshaft is different. I checked the part number. The part number is actually different. So we're going to try to measure the cam without taking it out. I'll take it out if I have to, just to verify that this does have a different camshaft than the older 300s. There's no way I'm going to be able to measure the cam just to see how much difference there is, but you can see these are the new forged rocker arms. So this is going to be a little bit more reliable for the high RPM applications with really aggressive camshafts. But I will tell you guys what I do know. I double checked the part number, and the part number for the 325 cam is the same part number for the naturally aspirated cam. So you do have a little bit more lift there. What that will mean is this is not going to respond to an aftermarket cam as well as a 300 would. We will be putting the Riva cam in this, seeing how well this performs with the Riva cam, and then we will also be putting the Kahles Performance camshaft in this and seeing how well it will perform with that. So I obviously have a lot of work left to do. I got to get all of this back together, finish breaking it in, and we're going to start modifying this thing. Be on the lookout for the next video where we do a speed limiter delete and see how fast we can go with just that done to it. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode.